Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The third, and what was believed to be at the time the final Indiana Jones movie, has always been my favorite of the original trilogy. Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of the best action-adventure films ever made, and Temple of Doom, while not as good, was a very unique and different follow-up. But The Last Crusade has something that both of those films just didn't really have enough of: heart. Last Crusade has more emotion, genuine stakes. It humanizes the character of Indiana Jones more than any of the films because of the relationship between him and his father. But we'll get into that soon. When I was a kid, this movie was recorded off of TV onto VHS. And so I watched that specific VHS quite often. And I was pretty skillful with pressing stop on the record button for the VCR when a commercial would start. So as I watch the film today, I always remember where the commercial breaks were. Since audiences didn't like Temple of Doom as much, and Spielberg got a lot of flack for the film's intense violence, The Last Crusade is definitely an attempt at going back to basics. It's very much like Raiders. It brings back Marcus Brody. It brings back Sala. Lots of the action takes place in the desert. And this time he's after the Holy Grail, supposedly the cup that Christ drank from at the Last Supper. And so in that way, it feels like it has some connective tissue to another biblical artifact like the Ark of the Covenant. And for some critics in 1989, that bothered them, like, say, Gene Siskel, for instance. And normally it would bother me too, that it feels like it's taking from something we've seen and we love, and it feels like it's using that as a blueprint if the story and the way this film goes and plays out wasn't so great. Because this movie does a lot of things really differently from Raiders, namely that relationship between Indy and his father, played brilliantly by Sean Connery. This film's opening titles use the original font from Raiders, and since Kingdom of the Crystal Skull did the same thing, that makes Temple of Doom the only film that has a unique opening logo. This is also easily my favorite opening scene of all Indiana Jones films. The opening of Raiders is truly brilliant, and we all love the classic scene with the idol, but again, going back to the emotion, the beginning of Last Crusade exploring Indiana Jones' young years and his first real adventure, when he discovers that some men have found the Cross of Coronado and are planning to sell it. That cross is an important artifact. It belongs in a museum. And there's a great bait and switch to this scene too, because you don't know that this kid is Indiana Jones. In fact, he's creeping up on somebody who looks exactly like Indiana Jones. He's got the jacket, he's got the fedora, and as soon as Spielberg reveals that that's not Indy, we meet young Indiana Jones, played wonderfully by River Phoenix. Man, what a tragedy that this actor was not seen in more material. He was so good in this film and other movies like My Private Idaho with Keanu Reeves, and The Mosquito Coast, which starred Harrison Ford, and it's one of the reasons that River Phoenix got to play this role. Ford recommended River Phoenix to Spielberg because of his work with him on that film. Side note, The Mosquito Coast apparently is Harrison Ford's favorite film he's ever been in, Peter Weir's movie. Phoenix stated that since he had worked with Ford before on The Mosquito Coast, he was able to fashion an impression of him, and he's excellent. He's so good as this character, and it kind of makes me sad that we never got to see a young Indiana Jones show with River Phoenix as that character. Not that Sean Patrick Flannery was bad, it was just River Phoenix, man. In this scene, we see the beginnings of his greatest phobia, that of snakes, falling into a snake pit on a train during a great chase sequence. And since Harrison Ford has that famous scar across his chin that he apparently got in a car accident, they decided to explain that in this scene as well. When a lion approaches him, he grabs a whip off the wall, and the whip slices him across the chin. So as young Indy is fleeing from these guys, trying to protect the Cross of Coronado, he inadvertently impresses the leader of this gang. In a great moment where Indy is fleeing from the train, Spielberg pushes in on this guy, and he just cracks a smile all of a sudden, and you realize he likes this kid. One of my favorite bits of trivia about this movie is that this character, as I said, scripted as Fedora, was originally supposed to be Abner Ravenwood, the father of Marion. Why did they change that? That is such a great idea! Something else this opening explores ever so briefly is the turbulent relationship between Indy and his father. We only see his hands in this scene as he draws in his Grail diary, making his son count in Greek. It kind of reminds me of a deleted scene from E.T. that actually featured Harrison Ford where we only saw his hands. But after that hat goes on young Indy's face, Spielberg cuts to Indiana Jones as we know and love him, played by Harrison Ford, and we almost get two intros in this movie. It's fucking awesome. He's still fighting for this cross of Coronado, and he's able to get it eventually and bring it back to Marcus Brody. We go back to school, and we have a very similar opening for how Raiders opened. He's writing on the chalkboard, Marcus is approaching the room. It's all set up in the exact same way. The scenes are blocked almost identically. You can tell that Spielberg is really trying to make Raiders 2. Like, Temple was just like this thing that happened, and it's like an obscure, weird movie that now exists, whereas the rest are trying to be the same. And here they finally address how difficult it is for him to actually be a professor, because he's also going out collecting idols and Shankara stones and punching people in the face, but he has all this mail that's stacked up, and every student he knows wants to speak to him, and he's got to sneak out the goddamn window. These are little things I didn't pick up on when I was younger. I just thought, wow, he's really backed up at work. Oh no, he's really behind schedule, Mom. But he's soon confronted by some men and brought to Walter Donovan's house, played by Julian Glover, who was also in The Empire Strikes Back. And even though we don't know it yet, the villain is now giving us the exposition about the Holy Grail and everything that we need to know about this artifact that Indiana Jones doesn't initially believe in, but is nevertheless incredibly enticed by, but he still says, hey, why don't you just try my dad? Grail lore is his hobby. And we learn that his father was the project leader to find the Holy Grail, but he's disappeared. It's not quite as fun as the way he handled exposition in Raiders, like with the monkey and the poison dates while they're learning about the length of the staff, or all of the crazy meals that are served in Temple of Doom, but this feels more weighty. We understand that there's some real stakes involved. In the following scene, Indy and Marcus find his father's house ransacked, and I appreciate that Spielberg sets up a legitimate, mysterious feeling. Indy asks Marcus if he believes in this, and I imagine after Raiders of the Lost Ark, when he originally said, I don't believe in any of this superstitious hocus pocus, that probably changed after the ending of that film, even though his eyes were closed. He opened those eyes and the Nazis were all fucking gone, so he knows that there is some shit out there. But this movie doesn't just treat this like it's a cool item or something he can obtain that you can put on the poster. It makes the characters question their beliefs. In Raiders, Marcus decided not to go on the mission, but in this film, he's like, nah, tell him we'll take 2 tickets, bitch. I'm coming on this fucking mission, whether you like it or not. I love everything that they do with Marcus Brody in this movie. Denholm Elliott could have been that really annoying sidekick. He is pitch perfect throughout this movie. Another actor who we have lost. Such a phenomenal role in this movie. He's so funny. He's so likable. He brings just the right amount of comedy to this film. Here we meet Elsa Snyder, who accompanies Indy and Marcus to a library. There's a really beautiful little exchange between the two where Indy steals a flower. It's this little tiny bit of dialogue that is actually really, really great, but it's said so quickly that you just don't notice how good it is. And even though we expect a level of knowing, tongue-in-cheek humor in an Indiana Jones movie, this movie purposefully mocks X marks the spot. In Indy's lecture, he says X never, ever marks the spot. But when he goes to this library and starts to investigate, he has to admit, X marks the spot. But I could easily see this scene being mocked by people if they hadn't earlier mocked the idea of X marking the spot themselves. And since they set it up as a joke, like, yeah, that never happens in real archaeology, later they can do it. They can get away with it. And again with the humor, the stamp guy. This is always one of the funnier sequences in this movie, and it's such an easy joke. It's so easy and simple, I'm jealous of it. This guy stamping things, and he keeps looking at the stamp because Indy is crushing this floorboard. When Indy discovers the entrance to the catacombs and he goes down inside, he's got a smile when he looks around, which is just perfect. This character is so excited to be in this dark, dank, skeleton-filled, rat-infested catacomb because this is where he truly feels alive. Those little moments like that throughout this movie tell you so much about the characters. Raiders had snakes, Temple had bugs, this film has rats, which apparently were bred specifically for this movie because if they brought in other rats, they might have diseases and shit, and so they fucking bred rats for this movie. I can't even imagine that. Like, just imagine putting that on your resume. I directed a movie and they specifically bred rats for my movie. God damn it. You pay attention to what I say. And again, with Indy's excitement when they find the shield, and he's starting to realize that his dad's Grail diary was accurate, that his dad was really onto something. And here's where they first encounter the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword, people sworn to protect the Holy Grail. We get a phenomenal boat chase here that's filled with comedy and action. I love the giant propeller and the sequence there, especially this shot, having both of the actors in frame in a wide with this thing destroying the boat. Not only does it look great, but it feels like they're in real danger. And in the following scene, Indy realizes that Elsa's room has been broken into. And it's interesting knowing that Elsa is in league with the Nazis and that she did this to her own room. Because as soon as Indy sees that, he grabs the diary and is like, this is what they were looking for. Elsa got exactly what she wanted in that moment. She probably wanted him to just say like, yeah, this is the thing, and they didn't get it. And it makes her look trustworthy, and she knows now that Indy has the diary. It's a pretty clever scheme on her part. And just like in Raiders, where Spielberg had that great scene where Indy was just pointing to parts of his body that didn't hurt, getting Marion to kiss him, starting this romantic moment, here, an argument leads to romance. But the following scene makes me long for that possibility that was always in the air of a haunted castle Indiana Jones movie. They go to a castle and we get this great bit where Harrison Ford can flex his surprisingly great comedy chops, playing this Scottish lord. But originally George Lucas had pitched the idea of a haunted castle being an Indiana Jones movie, but Spielberg had just made Poltergeist, and so he didn't want to do another haunting style movie. Damn. We were this close to an Indiana Jones in a haunted castle. But here Spielberg brings back the Nazis. He's going full Raiders this time and bringing back the villains from that film. They're also after the Holy Grail because they want the power it has, supposedly the ability to grant someone eternal life. And this is where the movie propels into the fucking stratosphere. The idea of having Sean Connery, James Bond himself, play Indiana Jones' father. Perfect casting. And this is my favorite role of Sean Connery's career. I love him as Bond. I love him in Hunt for Red October. I love him in The Untouchables, his Oscar-winning role. But this role in particular, man, did he ever knock it out of the park. You learn their entire dynamic in this scene. He calls his son Junior. Indy's annoyed by that. He hits him across the head accidentally with like a vase. And then he's relieved because he realizes the vase is fake. He barely cares that he smashed it over his son's head. He's just glad the thing is fake. It's fake. See, you can tell. With the cross-section. When the Nazis break into the room and father and son have an argument and Indy grabs a gun and kills all the Nazis, Sean Connery's reaction to all of this is one of my favorite moments in the whole movie. This sets up maybe my favorite father-son relationship in a movie. Indy does all of these amazing things that any father in this situation, running for their lives from Nazis, would be like, damn, nice job, son. He's never impressed with anything that Indy does throughout the whole film. And it's just such a great dynamic. It humanizes Indiana Jones as a character to such great extents. We already understood that he was a person. He was very vulnerable in the other movies. But in this one, we understand that he's had a life. And when we're amazed by the cool things Indy does and his dad's not, it just brings him right down to earth. I also love that the movie reveals all of its villains right here pretty early. It's before we get to the halfway point. We don't save it for some final twist that Donovan's actually a bad guy or that Elsa's in league with the Nazis. One of the greatest jokes in the whole movie is in the following scene when they realize that Donovan's the true bad guy. When Indy is like, how did you know Elsa was a Nazi? She talks in her sleep. So the Nazis are after the Grail diary, and they want to know where it is. Indy says, Marcus Brody has a head start on you. He'll blend in, disappear, you'll never see him again. With any luck, he has the Grail already. Does anyone here speak English? Denholm Elliott is so good in this movie. Oh my god. And in this scene, we meet Sala. He returns and it's a welcome sight. Run! Yes, run! Run! In the following scene, Indy and his father are tied up. Indy has a lighter. He tries to pass it to his father to burn through the ropes, but he drops it and starts a fire himself, and so they have to escape the room. They eventually escape on a motorcycle, and as I said earlier, anything that Indy does, most likely his father doesn't find it all that impressive. And even though this scene is a blast, it ends with a very abrupt shift in tone when his father slaps him in the face. That's for blasphemy. I swear every line was written for Sean Connery. Like every line, they were like, this is a Sean Connery line. Can you put S's and H's in it, please? But again, even though we've just had this really fun action scene on a motorcycle, Spielberg continues to humanize the character. They talk about their backstory. They talk about Indy's mother and the illness that she had and how she kept it from them and how he was never able to feel like he grieved properly. It's beautiful. It's also a great reminder of his father's obsession and how he never felt like he fully understood it and how it kept them apart. The next scene is absolutely terrific. Indy runs into actual Hitler and he gets the Grail diary back from Elsa saying, my father didn't want it incinerated. And I also like how Indy is willing to kill Elsa in this moment because she stood up with the Nazis. Who gives a damn what you think? But when he bumps into Hitler and Hitler signs this book, the very book that Hitler wants, and he just walks away, it's so great that they're essentially saying Hitler's ego was so gigantic that he couldn't even see past the fact that the exact thing he wanted is in his hand. But he's like, no, this kid just wants an autograph. Here you go. I'm evil. Next, Indy and his father are boarding a blimp, and here's Pat Roach, his third appearance in the Indiana Jones films. Originally, there was a little fight with him and Indy, but it was actually deleted. When Vogel boards the blimp and finds Indy's father, Indy steals a uniform and says, tickets, please. He doesn't have a ticket, so he throws him off. No ticket. This is easily the funniest of all 4 Indiana Jones movies. Every joke works. They all land. The scene after this with Indy and his father on the boat is so beautifully written. Oh, no, I'm here now. What do you want to talk about? Well, I can't think of anything. Then what are you complaining about? It's so beautiful. It's great. I love this fucking movie so much. Why don't they make movies like this anymore, man? Seriously, why don't they? What the fuck? Make good movies again, please. When they realize they're being taken back to Germany, they flee to a plane attached to the bottom of the blimp, and they escape. But there are enemy planes along the way, which leads to a dogfight. I love this sequence, especially Connery blowing up the tail of the plane by accident. Son, I'm sorry. They got us. Something else about the scene I've always wondered about is Indy saying, fly? Yes! Land? No! I'm assuming that after Temple and the sequence where the plane crashes and he says he can't fly, that he learned. He must have took lessons to avoid that happening again. What's also unique about the scene is it feels like it's setting up a sequence with a plane, but it becomes other things. The plane goes down, so now they have to get to a car. Now they're fleeing to a beach, and the planes are still firing upon them. Those people are trying to kill us! I know, Dad! But here Spielberg gives one of the best ways for their relationship to start to bond and start to get better. Because Connery has this idea. He's like, I'm just gonna go take my umbrella and scare all these seagulls to make the seagulls crash into the plane. And Indy is just staring at his dad like, who the fuck is this guy? Where was this guy when I was a kid? This guy's pretty cool. Raiders had the truck chase, Temple had the minecart chase, and Last Crusade has a brilliant tank chase. This sequence is thrilling. It still looks amazing. All of the stunts are great, especially leaping from the horse onto the tank. The entire fight sequence with Vogel, Indy shooting all the Nazis with one bullet, Ford getting his face pressed against the wheel, the blocking of the whole sequence where Indy uses his whip to rescue his dad, and of course Harrison Ford doing so much of the stunts himself, like hanging from the gun, all the dirt being thrown in his face. He's getting pummeled with a shovel. This movie understands that Indy has to escape from the skin of his teeth. He has to feel like he's facing real opposition, that he always just gets out of these little moments by a thread. And there's stakes to this scene. It's not just a fun chase. His dad's in there, and so is Marcus. So you feel like something bad could happen. And Marcus and his little secret handshake greeting with Henry is one of the most adorable things in this movie. Henry, don't you see the pen? The pen is mightier than the sword. And as the tank is approaching the cliffside, Indy's hat blows off. It doesn't even survive this moment. This is the first time they've purposefully had his hat fly off in the middle of an action scene, suggesting that he might fucking die. And this sequence ends with one of my favorite death screams of all time. The past 10, 15 minutes have been nothing but noise, music, brilliant score, all of the explosions and sound effects and punches. And it all just cuts out right here as his dad looks down at what he believes to be the wreckage of his son's death. It's such a powerful moment. And when he sees his son and just gets this incredible look of relief and embraces him, it's easily the most emotionally resonant moment of any Indiana Jones scene. Now here we get to the third act of the movie, which is without a doubt my favorite third act of any Indiana Jones film. In Raiders, it's exciting, but Indy's tied to a post the whole time. I love the ending of Temple. It's a lot of fun, but it's basically just a lot of action scenes. In this movie, there is real, genuine stakes. Donovan's shooting Indy's father, knowing that my dad is going to die unless I pass these tests, and his only help is his dad's Grail diary. And they cut back to his dad, who's understanding the positions that his son is in. He knows the tests his son is doing. And so it feels almost like they're doing the tests together. Henry did all the research, and Indy's benefiting from it to save his father. It's so fucking beautiful, man. Honestly, the first test is kind of the most fucked up one. Like, it seems like that would be like the one where, like, if you make it through the first one, you at least like have a knowledge of the other ones. Like, you can probably spell God's name, or at least have a knowledge of that. And then the one after that is sort of like, the bridge kind of looks interesting if I go like this. Huh. Oh, it's like an illusion. All right, I'll just walk. That first one, though, that's some dangerous shit. Not only does one cut off your head, but if it misses you, it kind of slices up your fucking groin. Like... But it's not just the stakes of his father's life. It's also his beliefs. He has to come to terms with whether or not these things mean something to him. It's a brilliant third act, and it is easily the best of the trilogy. And I'm just going to keep saying the trilogy. It's a trilogy. But he eventually finds the knight, the man who was charged with keeping the Grail safe. And since he found the real Grail, he's immortal. He can't pass the Great Seal. So he's been there for many hundreds of years. Donovan comes in, and Elsa suggests the wrong Grail on purpose to drink from. Donovan does, and as usual, per the Indiana Jones movies, the villain's own ambition kills them in the end. In what is still an incredible effect. I miss effects like this. He chose poorly. And I like how Indy knows that the real cup is kind of like old and dirty looking. It doesn't look like it's fancy at all. He drinks from it. You have chosen wisely. He's able to save his dad, but there's this great moment where Henry just looks at the Grail and realizes, I'm holding in my hand what I have been searching for my entire life, which is what makes the following scene so brilliant. The ground starts to fall out from beneath them because Elsa takes it, brings it past the seal, which starts this destruction of this entire place. Indy's holding on to Elsa, and she believes she can reach this thing, and her greed and her lust for it causes her to fall to her death. When Indy is in the exact same position next, and his father is holding on to him, Indy can grab it. It's enticing him, just like it did Elsa, but his dad calls him Indiana for the first time. He doesn't call him Junior. This makes Indy realize, just forget about it. If my dad, who's been hunting for this thing his entire life, is willing to let it go, I should too. And what I also love about this scene is it's not only that he calls him Indiana, he calls him the name that he prefers to be called. He doesn't say Henry. He calls him the name Indy would rather be known as. And what I want to say about John Williams for this movie is his theme for the Grail is my favorite thing he's done in this film. It is haunting. It is so, so gorgeous. And in this following moment where we see the Grail Knight, Henry's able to have this little stare down with him for a second. It gives me chills every time. Now Marcus, Sala, Henry, and Indy are about to ride into the sunset when Henry says, Indiana, we named the dog Indiana. You are named after the dog? I got a lot of fond memories with that dog. I also named my dog Indiana, or Indy for short, because of this movie. George Lucas's dog was named Indy as well, and you had a dog of a similar breed in the opening scene of this film. The four of them literally ride off into the sunset, the perfect ending for Indiana Jones and this trilogy. Except it wasn't. They made another one. Yep, they did. I'm going to give Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade an A+. This film has entertained me for years. I think it has all of the action that makes an Indiana Jones film exciting, but it has the heart and it has the emotion that none of the previous two did. And even though I love those movies, this film just humanized the character to such an extent. The relationship between him and his father brought him down to earth, and it really made him feel like a lived-in person. Guys, thank you so much for continuing to watch my Indiana Jones reviews. I got one more to do for you, as I have already alluded to. That's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Look forward to that next Sunday. Thank you guys so much, as always, for watching. And if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.